Havana. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Tom Malinowski of New Jersey. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He served as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor under the Obama administration. So all of these global events that we were just talking about, you know a great deal about, Congressman. Good to see you. Let's start with Cuba. What, in your opinion, is going on, and what, in your opinion, should the United States be doing about it?
What's going on is that people are fed up with years of poverty and repression. It's really remarkable that we've seen these kinds of protests in Cuba, given the lengths that the communist regime goes to stop protests. I mean, you asked how do they stop them? It's very simple. They arrest people and they beat people. It's incredibly risky to protest against the government, and yet people were doing it. I think, you know, what we can do. We've been debating our Cuba policy in our country for many, many years. We have a trade embargo on Cuba. I think it's incredibly important for people to know our trade embargo is not in any way responsible for the suffering of the Cuban people. The government of Cuba maintains their own embargo on their own people, prohibiting them from owning private businesses, from exporting or importing goods, from being paid by foreign companies if a foreign company is allowed to do business in the country. But that embargo still enables the communist regime to falsely blame the United States for these problems. And so I would gradually go back to the policy that the Obama administration tried for a few years to try to take the U.S. restrictions off the table as an argument that the Cuban regime can use. And also, I'd be looking at every technical way that we have available to us to try to expand internet access in Cuba so that these people who are protesting against the regime have a way to communicate and to know what's going on despite the censorship of their government.
A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations, who says it is the embargo that causes these problems. So it's a chicken and an egg situation. You are arguing for going back to what President Obama wanted to do, which a lot of Americans, sort of the anti-Cuban lobby in the United States, calls appeasement. Not different from what the Obama administration and now the Biden administration wants to do with Iran. Iran is being belligerent and is doing bad things to its own people, but America, or this administration's view is, if we open things up a little bit and make things a little bit better for them, what happens then? Do the Cubans get more of a taste for it? Does it weaken the government's grip on the state? Why is doing good things for them right now helpful as opposed to hurtful?
So I think one thing that would be helpful to ordinary Cubans would be if we allow Cuban Americans to send remittances to their families in Cuba. Even that's complicated because the communist regime is able in many respects to benefit from any money that's going into the country, but at least that's people to people, that's family to family. I think, look, it's not black and white. There are a lot of people on the left in the United States who buy into this notion that Cubans are starving, Cubans are poor because we have this blockade or embargo against them, and that's not true. They are able to trade with every other country in the world. Mm-hmm. There are many foreign companies in Cuba. They can import food from the rest of the world. The problem is that the communist regime has abolished private property and private enterprise and every sort of freedom that the people in other countries have to be able to feed themselves and to be able to prosper. So the reason that I think we should take the embargo gradually off the table is not because I think it'll have an immediate positive impact for ordinary Cubans, but because it will take that argument away from the Cuban communist regime and their supporters. It'll make it absolutely plain that this poverty that the Cuban people are protesting against is 100% the fault of their communist regime.
Congressman, I want to ask you about Haiti. This is a confusing situation in a country that you and I are old enough to remember is fragile. It was an early democracy, the earliest one in the Western Hemisphere, but boy, it is fragile, and it went through decades of disastrous government. What happens now?
I don't know. I think the most important thing is trying to figure out, obviously helping the Haitians figure out who killed their former prime minister and to make sure that the perpetrators, whoever they are, whoever may have supported them, are brought to justice. And number two, and this is what we are doing with diplomats from other nations, to try to help facilitate a lawful and peaceful transition to a successor who is seen as legitimate by the Haitian people. There's not much more we can do in the short term than those two things. So there was this talk about sending American troops, and we've invaded Haiti. It seems periodically over our history. It never seems to help. This is something they have to work out, but we can facilitate a more legitimate transition through diplomacy.
Congressman, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. Democratic Representative Tom Malinowski of New Jersey.